Hey everybody, what's going on? Friday night. How are you? Welcome to Tone Talk with Mark Uzansky and Dave Friedman. We got a special guest tonight, Amir Derakh. How are you, Amir?
Hi, I'm good.
Awesome, man. Thanks for
Okay.
joining. Amir is from various bands such as Julien-K, Dead by Sunrise, Orgy, Rough Cut, uh, long history of loving gear, so he's going to fit right in on this conversation. So,
That's amps and guitars and pedals and all the goodies, yeah, for sure.
and Neve consoles and
Oh yeah, and all the production goodies too.
hi guys, since Mark didn't introduce me.
oh, I didn't say hi, Dave. Didn't I say Dave Friedman?
Hey Dave.
Hi guys, I'm coming to you from Louisville, Kentucky. Louisville. I
Lou.
was, someone will correct me, I'm sure.
I think it's Louisville.
Because well, it depends on if you say it with the accent or not, or with the proper way to say it, or
Yeah, well,
whatever. I had to fly out at the last minute to repair Slash's rack guitar system. So, woohoo! We'll see what I get tomorrow.
so you don't know what's happening with it,
No,
but it's not working.
it's kind of working. I don't know. It's too hard to. I can't diagnose it on the phone with them.
Uh,
So they wanted me to come out. So I'm here again, traveling. After just getting back from Europe.
yeah, it's. Well, that's too bad. Um, yeah, it's been
I want,
a long
I
week.
want to know where my croissant is. My croissant and bottle of rosé.
So, how was your trip to Europe?
It was great, especially Barcelona.
So, how long did you were there like 2 weeks, right?
Yeah, we're in Germany, Netherlands, Barcelona, and two different Lyon and Paris, France.
That's man, I wish I was there. Was it grueling though?
Barcelona,
What's that?
especially Barcelona.
Yeah, I hear Barcelona is awesome. Well, Steve Vai said it was awesome too. Was the food great?
Yeah, have you ever been to Barcelona, Mir?
I have. It's really cool.
There's some very cool things about it.
Yeah, for sure. It's kind of
Top,
funny because
topless beaches.
yeah, yeah, it kind of reminds me a little bit of Southern California there,
With the
right?
European feel.
Right, right.
European feel. Yeah, which really sets it apart though. Um, yeah, no, we stayed at a really nice hotel. It was really cool. We had a day off there, which was the only day off we had. Um, we drove 15 hours to get there.
Wow.
Yeah. Thank you, Dennis. The man that was driving. So
All right, where should we start off with this? Where do we begin? I mean, obviously, well, Dave and I have a history since I guess the '90s, right?
yeah,
Um,
when was it we first met? Was it Orgy or no? Or was
yeah,
it before?
no, it was when I had just, we had just finished our record and I had done all this crazy stuff in the studio, and I'm like, how the hell am I going to do this live? And I came to you, but I don't remember how I met you.
I don't either.
I had no.
Someone knew someone.
Yeah, so everybody's like, oh, you got to go to Dave Friedman, Rack Systems.
Yeah,
You'll
you just
figure it out.
you just heard through the. When did you guys meet?
Yes, probably later '90s, probably like '97 or something.
And were you on the gear page? Were you like looking at gear and stuff like that? Did you hear about Dave like through the grapevine? Is that?
Yeah, I'm not sure how I met Dave, who introduced me, actually. I really don't know.
Mm.
During the time, it was pretty much, there wasn't that many people doing it. A lot of rigs were getting built and stuff. So it really didn't, there's not many choices, you know.
Yeah.
And in
Yeah.
fact, at the time, there were probably only two.
Bob Bradshaw.
Yeah, and myself.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I honestly don't remember how I met you. I almost wonder if it was like Jay from NRG or something. JB.
might have
Maybe. Had to be somebody pretty knowledgeable, because obviously what you were doing was, very precise type of thing, building these military grade racks to go on the road with all this gear,
Yeah, totally.
And, to your credit, Dave, my rig, as complicated as it was, it never went down once. Not once. Seriously.
That's good.
Yeah. I think there was only one time I ever had a glitch, and it had nothing to do with anything you did. It was really just my JP8080 was not liking the power, and I literally just had to turn it off and turn it back on, and I was in business. That was it.
So what was like the rack back then that you were using?
Oh my God, it was big.
Yeah. It was a refrigerator. Yeah, well, basically, I had, when we started Orgy, it was Jay Gordon and myself and Ryan Shuck. It was we were like a production team, and we started doing this stuff. I mean, we were producing all these other bands. They were becoming successful, and so we started doing our own stuff. And, from the very beginning, we knew that we wanted to do something different. We knew what we didn't want to do. We didn't know exactly what we wanted to do, but we had an idea. And so we just started kind of creating this sound out of nowhere. And part of that was that I was using a guitar synthesizer, which, back in the 80s when I actually got it, my first one I actually got from Grover Jackson. He actually gave it to me. He had gone to Japan, and Roland had given him this whole GR700 setup. And when he came back and I was out at the shop, he's like, yeah, I brought you back something from Japan. He's like, you're the only person that would ever know what to do with this. That's what he said. And he gave me a Roland GR700, a whole rig. So I had that even back when I was in Rough Cut. And of course I tried to use it then, but like my band really wasn't into it. And of course at that time, guitar synthesizers were kind of not cool for most people. For me, I thought cool. It was like when Judas Priest did that whole Turbo album where they were using the same guitar synthesizer. I loved it. But I know they got kind of panned for that album. But I feel like it was way ahead of their time, obviously, what they were doing. So anyway, I got that thing, and then eventually, years later, this was sort of my opportunity to use it. And, I sort of morphed it between a guitar and a synth. I didn't really want to use it in the way that people had done it before. I was kind of thinking like Jan Hammer, where like Jan Hammer used to play his mini Moog through a Marshall amp. And I always thought that made the synth sound so much cooler, right? Because it had this like attitude to it instead of just plugging it in, right? It's like running through a distortion box, basically, right?
Yeah.
So when I started using the guitar synth for Orgy, it became a big part of the sound. I had this way that I was routing it. It's a stereo instrument. So half of it was going direct through a bunch of effects and pedals and all this kind of stuff. And then the other half was going into my Marshall amp. So, after doing the record and creating this crazy sound and setup, I'm like, how am I going to do this live? And that's where Dave came into the picture. And we just kind of went in there and just started to figure out how we could do the switching and the routing. And, because half of it was basically going to a DI and half of it was going to an amp that was mic'd. And I had multiple guitar synths. There were two different controllers, and then in the rack there was some, like a JP8080 and a Korg MS2000 and like a TC 2290, like a studio delay.
Yeah.
And then like a bunch of cool pedals, a tuner, Eventually I even added another amp that was like a cleaner amp. So I needed to be able to switch between all of this and also go direct. Yeah, it was pretty nutty. And then I had a MIDI controller that was changing all the presets between all of the different synth modules and the controller and all that kind of stuff. So, and I think Dave was you were probably already starting to mod amps around that time, right?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah. I think you were, because I remember you showing me a couple that you had done back like around that time, which is pretty cool.
I just remember you coming in and with this crazy routing scheme and with all
it sounds pretty crazy.
I'm like, you want to do what? But it worked out really well. It was really cool, and some of the pedals went direct, right? Wasn't that?
Yeah. All the effects went direct. So the direct line always had pedals on it of some sort, pedals or the TC 2290,
right?
Which was either delays, flange, chorusing, various. I mean, that thing's an amazing in itself. It sounds so good. So that was kind of its own sound, and then the other side that went to the guitar amp didn't have any pedals. It was just my old standard Mike Morin modded Marshalls that I used for years.
Yeah.
What was modded about it?
So just to kind of get your head around this, people. So you have a Marshall going, which is kind of the normal guitar tone, so to speak.
Yeah.
But then you have a direct line that's totally direct, with like Boss Hyper Fuzz, right?
Yep.
That was the main. Wasn't that the main fuzz?
Yes, that's the main fuzz. And then there was a phaser, a chorus, and then I think the rest was the 2290. I was able to do flanging and delays and all that kind of stuff with the 2290. It does a great flange, that rack unit. Has a very good flange.
And then this was all with tuned down guitars, correct?
Yeah, and then, of course, the other thing was all the guitars I was using, whether it be the Roland, the Parker, the Jacksons, trying to think, the Yamahas, all the different guitars I used, they were all tuned to B flat.
Wow.
Because at the time, a lot of the, new metal bands and the heavy bands of the time, Korn, well, even Linkin Park to some degree, they all tuned down, but we had to go a half step lower.
Just because.
Yeah. This Korn was in D, so we're like, maybe we'll go to A. And I was like, no, A's too low. It's just too floppy, even with the heavier strings. So we went to B flat, which of course made the synth tracking extremely difficult.
You made it hard on yourself.
But the thing is, the whole point of that for me was, I wasn't looking for perfection out of those devices. My whole kind of modus operandi or whatever is, I like weird stuff. I like things to do weird things accidentally and have happy accidents and mistakes. And, and those guitar synths triggered really badly. So, you could play something and all of a sudden it would just play something way cooler than what I just played. I'd try to play some lick and all of a sudden it would just do some crazy thing. And I'm like, oh, that's it, done. And it would never be the same twice, but that was what was kind of fun about it. And then, I really would just kind of mix in the guitar because you had all these controls on the guitar where you could blend between full synth or guitar. So a lot of the rhythms and stuff, they're a blend of both. That way you get the attack and everything from the guitar, regular playing. And then the synth is sort of in there filling it in. But it was a bit difficult. I mean, I did sometimes have to learn how to play a little ahead because if it was something really rhythmic, the tracking was latent, So I have to learn how to kind of push it a little bit to make it sound right when we were, playing live and in the studio even more so because you hear everything in the studio. But so it was kind of a combination of those two things. that sort of made up that sound, which I don't think anybody's ever done anything like it. I don't know if anybody wants to.
Super cool. It sounded mean.
It was a huge sound. Like if you could actually hear the live rig through like a PA, it was ridiculous. It doesn't sound like anything you've ever heard before. I promise you that.
I mean, these were like 20 space racks.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I did another one for the other person in the band.
The other person.
Yeah, the other person. My brain is not working right now.
Are you talking about Ryan?
Ryan, thank you.
Poor Ryan.
Sorry, I've been traveling like all day, and my brain is just like, I'm like going, and the other person, and I know his name so well.
Yeah.
Sorry, Ryan.
It's okay. He actually wanted me to ask you. I'm going to bring his amp up. We're going to tweak it a little bit.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, no problem.
So, yeah, I mean, yeah, that was a crazy time for sure, the Orgy thing.
Yeah,
we were definitely doing a lot of different kinds of things, musically, sonically. I mean, we weren't playing to tracks. We actually rigged our V drums to be able to play samples and loops and all this crazy stuff. So it was all live between what
live band, people.
Huh?
It's a real live band, people.
I know. Even though we were electronic, I mean, it was very difficult, and it did not work very well in the beginning. It was a mess. It took us a little while to get it together, honestly. We really kind of fumbled our way through it, but it got, by the, later tours, like for the second album, I mean, we really had it down, and it was sounding really good by then. First album touring, not so good, but at least the statement was there. We had a sound and a look and all this other stuff, so it seemed to work.
I remember seeing you guys at the Mayan Theater.
Oh yeah,
Los Angeles.
I think
some touring cycle. I don't know which touring cycle that was.
I think we played there with Love and Rockets.
Yes, you did.
Yeah. Which was amazing because that's like one of my favorite bands. Love that.
Super.
I mean, it's basically Bauhaus without Peter Murphy.
Yeah.
And that's kind of, a lot of the influences that go into not only that band, but Julien-K, our new band, where the guy that you can't remember his name is the singer.
The singer.
Yeah, we kind of, when we moved on from Orgy, we kind of started this other thing, and that's what we've been doing, and it's been really great. We've engaged our fans directly with crowdfunding, and Dave and I have talked a lot about this in the past of how we've kind of reinvented our business, how we're doing things now.
Was that through
really great.
Indiegogo? Is that what it was through?
Yes, it has been in the past. We've used Indiegogo to fund our projects, our records, which actually the new album that we're going to be releasing soon, Harmonic Disruptor, which is our latest album, that also was funded with Indiegogo.
Yeah, I think Pete Thorne used that, didn't he? Or
I think he might have for his last album, yeah.
It was either Pete Thorne or Jason Becker, one of them, because I know that I signed up for something with them, and I paid for something. I got something.
Hopefully didn't. But
I paid for something. Got something. I can't remember either. Anything. What's your excuse? I've been traveling all day.
I worked all day. I don't know. It's later.
With his birthday yesterday, I think he went out late or something.
Yeah,
that's true. Yeah, I did go out late. I did.
Happy birthday! I didn't send you a text. I can't remember if I did or
no. You did. You did. Thanks.
Okay.
I appreciate it. Yeah, I ate so much that I was actually uncomfortable for most of the night. So
yeah,
I just ate like a pig. So, but yeah, no, thanks. Yeah.
So let's go back further. Let's go way back.
All right.
Yeah, let's do it.
We kind of started in the middle.
Yeah.
So, how far do you want to go back?
Well, how'd you become a musician?
No, what was before Rough Cut?
Well, I'll give you a little quick, I actually learned how to play guitar pretty quickly. It's kind of a funny story. I actually got my first guitar when I was 16, my first electric guitar, I should say. And funny enough, it was an Ibanez Iceman. Like, who gets that as their first guitar?
Yeah,
right?
That's pretty cool.
Me. Because I like weird guitars. And you know where I got that from was Rick Nielsen of Cheap Trick. I always loved that he had all those guitars, and he would like make these crazy guitars and all that. And I think that's where I got my initial love for like the possibility of creating guitars or having, strange guitars that other people don't have, basically, like have something unique. So around that time, I actually had a friend that was hired to teach me how to play guitar. And he was kind of teaching me scales and all this music theory stuff. And I just didn't get it. And he ended up quitting. He's actually a really good friend. He ended up quitting and telling my mom, I can't teach him anything. I just don't think he has what it takes. And he quit. Yeah. So my guitar kind of sat in my room for a while. And then what happened was I started teaching myself. I used to go to concerts with my cousin a lot. My cousin's a classically trained pianist. He's an amazing musician, and we actually write with him and Julien-K, and he's like my big brother. But we used to go to concerts all the time, and so we never had good seats. So I would take binoculars with me, and I would literally watch the guitar players, like whoever it was, Angus Young, Eddie Van. I saw some amazing shows when I was a kid or later teenager. And I would just watch what they were doing, and I started to see that there was kind of this common thread that most of them, what they were playing, it didn't really look that hard, And so I would go home and I would literally mimic what I saw. And all of a sudden, I was like, wow, da-na-na-na-na-na, da-na-na-na-na, or whatever, and I just started figuring it out on my own.
Right.
And within a couple years, I got really good, really quick. And that's when the Rough Cut call came. They had always had all these guitar players from San Diego. It had Jakey Lee was the first guitar player who you guys had on the show. And I texted Dave about it, and that was pretty funny.
Who? What? Now?
Now? Right now?
Was that? Oh, that was you during the show?
Yeah.
Oh, that's so funny. That's great.
And that comes into play later. I'll tell you that story briefly, but anyway, Jake was the first Rough Cut guitar player, and then he left to join Ozzy. And then they got this guy Craig Goldie, who was also from San Diego. The bass player Matt Thorne, who's one of my best friends, he was from San Diego. Chris Hager, the other guitar player, was from San Diego. So they came back to San Diego looking for a guitar player, and all of us used to hang out at Guitar Trader. That was like our big hangout. That's where Warren used to hang out, and all the Rat guys, and we all bought our gear. And they all knew me there, and when Rough Cut came looking, they suggested me, and I was at home and literally 5 minutes away, and they came to my house. And because I was so in tune with what was going on in LA, I actually had all their music, their demo tapes, and I already knew their songs, as well as many other bands from that time. So they came in, and I just started playing one of their songs, and they were like, wow, you're coming with us tonight. And I literally left that night for LA. And, within a few days, I got the gig. And one thing started leading to another. And then, we went to Europe and came back and got signed. Did our first record, and that's, I think, where not only did I learn to be a much better guitar player, pretty quickly, but I got to work with all these amazing producers in Rough Cut. I mean, the first album was done by Tom Allum and engineered by Mark Dodson, who also is a great producer and engineer, who, you know, did Judas Priest and, you know, a lot of some of my favorite metal records. And then Jack Douglas and Jay Messina, who did like John Lennon and Aerosmith and all kinds of stuff, did our second record. So I had already been recording, and I've always had a technical background with electronics and all that kind of stuff. So when I got in the studio, that was it. Like, I knew that I was always going to want to do that as well. Mm-hmm. Not just play guitar or whatever, but I was really fascinated by that whole process of recording. And I feel fortunate that I got to be around in the era of big boards, big studios, tape machines, all the gear that was outboard and real.
Real stuff.
Yeah, the real stuff that now I have all the virtual stuff, right? But it's fun to, you know, have seen that whole transition, you know? Yeah. And of course, all the musical transitions over the years, all the different bands that I've been in, and all of that. But anyway, you know, so I did Rough Cut, and that was kind of, it just sort of, I mean, I was really in love with new wave music and punk music as much as I was metal. And I just kind of ended up in a metal band. Even though I still had this kind of secret love for all of this music that was happening, like Gothic music and the beginnings of industrial music and new wave. And
you should have been born in Detroit with that.
Right.
There's a weird thing in Detroit with that background, like exactly what you said with the metal and then the new wave and the, you know, later the house music and all the electronic and,
well, techno started in Detroit.
Yeah.
So, which is, I love techno as well, but yeah, that's funny. Yeah, you're right.
You're from New York, right, Amir?
Originally, I was born in New York, and I lived there till I was about 11 or 12, and then my mom moved us out to San Diego.
Ah, okay. I moved away from New York around the same time.
Okay.
Yeah.
So. And where do you live again, Mark?
I'm in Florida.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but I'm in South Florida, Fort Lauderdale.
Oh, okay.
But I used to live in Brooklyn, New York, and Queens area and stuff like that in the city. And then when I was about 10, I moved. So I was curious. I saw you were from New York, so I was just curious when.
Yeah, no, I grew up there, but then, you know, spent all my teenage years basically in San Diego, and that's really where it actually started. For me, it started with electronics. I started fixing things. Like my mom's TV would stop working, or the stereo would not work, and I learned how to test tubes, and, you know, because all that stuff was tube driven and you know, powered. And it sounded amazing, of course, when I think back on it. But so I started fixing things. I started building things. I actually built my very first stereo. I didn't literally build it, but I kind of put it all together. I built the speakers. I had a quadraphonic system, which for probably a 12 or 13-year-old is kind of weird. But I literally had a quadraphonic record player, a quadraphonic receiver, and then I built speakers from components and old cabinets that, like, our neighbors didn't want anymore or whatever, and then I hung them in the four corners of my room.
Wow.
So I had like a surround system when I was like 13 years old. Mm-hmm. So there was something, you know, obviously there.
there was something there. With the quadraphonic reference, though, you're really dating yourself on that
one. All right. Everybody knows how old I am.
Hey, you know, I mean, I remember when I got my first pair of good speakers, like Boston acoustic speakers in college, you know, and I was just like, oh man, you know, like just being able to blast stuff. So I can only imagine quadraphonic, you know, the whole thing. That's cool.
Well, I actually put my speakers together, though. Like I literally sourced the components, sourced the crossover, and then, you know, kind of made my own speakers basically.
That's crazy at that age. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Cool.
You know, so
So then,
I was doing that even before making music basically.
Yeah, before even playing guitar.
No, yeah, totally before that, or even really listening to like bands and stuff. That didn't really start till a little bit later. Not much, but then I started listening to music, and then I actually, funny enough, wanted to buy a synthesizer. I wanted a Moog. I wanted to play a Moog.
Yeah.
And my cousin that I was talking about, my cousin James, he ended up buying the Moog before me. He's a little bit older, had a job, So he ended up getting the Moog, and I was just like, all right, well, what am I going to do now? And then that's where the whole guitar thing kind of came in. But it totally came full circle over the years, coming back to Orgy again and being able to get that synth and the guitar and everything to kind of come together. And of course, after that and now, I mean, I play keyboards and I do a lot of programming. And so I kind of get to have the best of both worlds now.
that's cool.
Right.
So then,
And
all right.
you're
So,
still-
what's that, Dave?
And you're still into stereos.
I am. Records.
Deeply.
Yeah, I've kind of gone back to, I've basically built not built it, but, compiled all these things I probably would have wished I could have had when I was a kid, like this giant Marantz receiver and these huge Infinity speakers. And, they sound amazing.
Yeah.
Wow.
Sounds amazing. And, I collect vinyl and,
You know what always amazes me is that with all the technology we have now, all the advances in A to D converters, D to A converters, all this stuff, it all just sounds like crap. I mean, really, the lost art of audio, like audio design,
yeah,
the surrounding components around the D to A and A to D, is the problem with stuff today. You have a great D to A to D now, but no one knows how to design around it.
yeah,
I mean, yes, some high-end studio equipment, of course, but I mean, for consumer, it's a lost art.
yeah.
I mean, if you looked at a service manual of an old Marantz receiver,
Oh, yeah.
it's like this detailed, like,
The novel.
and it's a shame, really, that's a lot lost. I think a lot of our stuff in life is lost. I mean, how to plaster a wall is lost, kind of, how to, old world craftsmanship. Does anyone know how to do it anymore? Like in architecture or something like that? Not really.
Well, I think what I call the golden age of audio was like the mid to late 70s. That's where I feel like some of the best, the coolest, the warmest kind of fun gear was made. That's where all the stuff that I have, at least the receiver and the speakers, the turntable and stuff, I don't really mess with old ones because they break a lot. And of course, the cartridge is new and super high fidelity and all that. But it really has a sound that you just can't get anywhere else. You have to rebuild them, of course. They all have to be recapped because they're 40 years old or whatever, But it's worth it, and it's become a thing.
Yeah.
It's definitely become a thing. You see that stuff now. It's very expensive to get any of that, and I think that's probably why why I still like tube amps, like real amps, and I use a cable. I hate wireless. It just doesn't sound as good.
I feel
At least
the
not
same
yet.
way.
I mean, I've tried a lot of modeling things, and obviously I use plugins in the studio, initially, but at the end of the day, if I want like a big tone, I have to have real amps, whether it be bass or guitar or whatever. a lot of times it's a blend of the plugins with the real amp, but there's always something missing with the plugins. The plugins, for one thing, what I find is that and a lot of people do this with a lot of plugin stuff, like with synthesizer plugins, with amp modeling, mic modeling, whatever it is. And the thing is, if you do an A/B comparison when it's just that, you've got the amp model, you've got the real amp, and you go back and forth and you go, wow, that sounds pretty close. But when you can really tell, though, is when you start mixing, because that's when the fake stuff disappears.
We've talked about this before many times, and you're right. It's 100.
Yeah, we've had this discussion with my friend, my sound guy friend Tom Abraham, when he was on our show. He was saying when he was with Keith Urban, they had a backup rig with an Axe-Fx, and they dialed it in, perfectly, where they couldn't tell when they were switching between it.
Right.
Where they couldn't tell.
Yeah.
So one night they're going to decide to use it in the show.
Yeah.
Switch halfway through and go to the B rig.
Yeah.
And the minute he did that, the guitar was gone from the PA.
Yeah.
It was just disappeared. And he kept trying to push it up higher. That wasn't working. Just disappeared. Just didn't sit anymore.
Yeah.
Sit properly in the mix.
There's something with the frequencies.
Yeah. I don't know.
Or the harmonic content of a real amp versus the modeled.
Well, it's like everything, and I know Dave understands this better than anybody. It's like, you go all the way down to the guitar, the pickup, and then the amp and everything else, but there's just things when it's the right thing, they just kind of poke through. Like those frequencies come through in the places you want them to. And I feel that a lot of there are some really good plugins, and I do use them a lot. But at the end of the day, it's like typically I always do have to kind of reinforce it one way or another, because they just kind of start to do this in the mix. They just start to vanish. And sometimes that's good. Sometimes I don't want the guitars or the bass or whatever it is to be so featured, right? Sometimes it's more about the electronics or the drums and the vocals, and you really don't want that big of a guitar sound. Then sometimes the plugin's great because it kind of just puts it back here. Still sounds good, but but if you want to get anything that's kind of a little more crushing, or like a rock sound of some sort, whatever that is. But I find that I have not been able to do it yet with just plugins. I've got to have a real amp, and the amp will definitely be probably the most featured thing. It'll be the forefront. Everything else is sort of reinforcing it. Like for our new album, it's really a hybrid. The sounds are really a hybrid now, because I have even more tools. So not only do I have maybe pedals running direct, I have plugins, and then I have real amps. So it's a lot of it is actually a hybrid of all three now for me. And I've actually given Dave one of our new songs that he heard. It was one of our super aggressive. It's actually kind of our first single or whatever. We just made a video for it, and that will be coming out previous to the album. I'm not sure when yet, because we're still working on that whole plan. The record's pretty much done. I'm actually mixing the last song right now. So, but yeah, it's been fun experimenting with having even more tools now, where I have the real amps, plus sometimes I'm using direct things and then plugins.
So what amps are you using?
I don't use any Friedman amps. Just kidding.
Yeah, they suck. They're horrible. That's funny.
Yeah.
There's a bar in Detroit called Smalls.
Yeah, I played there.
You played there, right?
Yeah.
And they used to have a saying above the door. It's like, "Welcome to Smalls. Fuck you."
That's awesome. No, I have
do Friedman picks like that.
Yeah, I have a BE50 and a BE. I think I used the BE100 on this. I don't think did I. I guess I had the BE50, but I just went with the BE100 because I just figured it's more.
Right.
I remember when you first had the BE100, and then you said, "Yeah, I'm going to get the 50, and maybe I might get rid of my 100," and now you still have both. Yeah, no, I won't do that either.
Well, it's kind of a funny, quick story about how I even came upon that, because I don't remember why, but I was at Guitar Center and happened to be in their little specialty tone room, and I saw Dave's amps. It was the first time I'd actually seen like a Friedman amp in the wild. You know, I knew he'd been making them, modding them, and he had different names that he was doing it under for a while, but I saw this like Friedman thing, and I'm like, is this Dave's amp? I think it was a Pink Taco.
Yeah.
Was the first one. And so anyway, I plugged into it and I was just floored immediately. I was like, holy shit, this thing is so cool. And then they had a BE100 in there too. And I plugged in that and it just blew my head off. So I immediately like texted Dave and I'm like, dude, are these your amps? So we got to talk. And yeah, so we ended up getting one of those, which I was actually using for the Rough Cut reunion stuff on Monsters of Rock and some of the shows that we did. And it was cool too, because when I was doing Monsters of Rock, Akira from Loudness had a BE100, and so I was able to borrow his, bring mine and borrow his so that I could do my stereo rig.
Right.
Nice.
So, and then when we just toured last year with Julien-K, Ryan and I decided that we were going to make the switch to Friedman's for the tour with like little 2x12 cabs, which you can see in some of the pictures that we've been posting. Mm-hmm. We made custom black and white versions because it kind of fits our thing, our whole California noir, our whole vibe. So we just kind of made black and white ones. They kind of look kind of a little like high watts or something, right? They're kind of cool.
Yeah, it was super cool.
Yeah. I mean, Dave had one that I guess you did it for yourself or whatever. And I'm like, dude, that looks awesome.
Yeah, you know the problem, every time I make myself an amp, I'm the person that wants it.
Yeah.
That insists on having it. No, it's happened every time.
Oh, that's a good thing.
Not you, but like, you know, it's like my black and white one that I think you saw at the time. There's a B50. Yeah, that went to John Shanks. And then, you know, I had a black and white small box, and that went to Ted Nugent's producer. Because he used it on Ted Nugent's record. And he goes, I got to have an amp. Can I have that one?
Yeah.
It's always going to have that one. And several other times, I think my B100 that I once had is with System of a Down. Yeah, that's and Darren, and there's been other ones too.
Hasn't that happened with your guitars too?
Not so much with the guitars. I've been a little stingy on that. I'm like, no, you can't have it. Well, yeah, but that wasn't mine. But you liked that one.
I did.
There was one I wasn't sure. I know Sammy Bowler got that really awesome one that's transparent and everything. But there was one recently that someone was like, I forget what it was, and they were like, Dave, I want your guitar, and you're like,
yeah, look at that custom backplate.
Oh, nice.
Thanks to Grover.
Yeah, I went to Grover and had him whip that up. This thing sounds amazing. I mean, I'm actually, Ryan and I are producing this band. I think actually you're gonna like it, Dave. It's just a rock and roll 5-piece band, but they're all teenagers. They're really good. They're called Slaves to Humanity.
Oh, cool.
Anyway, I'm using this on that, and it sounds really awesome.
That's cool.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we could talk a little bit about Grover and all of that now.
Yeah, I'd love to hear about it.
Oh yeah, in the Rough Cut days.
Yeah. So, yeah, when I first started playing in bands, I was already fascinated with weird shapes. And one of the first guitars I ever bought was a Charvel Star Body, and it was purple. And I got it at Guitar Trader in San Diego. And that became my main guitar. And actually, even into when I got in Rough Cut, I still had that guitar. It ended up getting kind of bastardized and made into two guitars because at the time I needed a backup. So it ended up being split off into two separate guitars. But that's around the time, I guess I was about 20 when I met Grover, and they were still in San Dimas. And he really just kind of took me under his wing and just started showing me like how to make guitars. And that's when I started painting my guitars with the airplane graphics, the fighter plane graphics. Mm-hmm. And a lot of those early guitars were made out of spare parts from what they used to call the bone room. They were seconds. They were like pieces that, for whatever reason, you know, they got thrown in the bone room, right? But I mean, cool. I made these guitars though, and they were amazing. But you know, if they had some sort of weird defect, they probably got painted over or whatever, and you would never know. I remember one of my guitars, the fingerboard had like spots on it or something, and it's like nothing that would ever really matter. But we ended up making guitars together, and he used to walk me around and actually show me like the whole process, not only, you know, the machinery and the handwork and all of that, but he would, you know, we'd go through and pick the woods, and he'd explain why this body is better than that body, and this neck and that, and why all this does this. And so I learned kind of how to make guitars from him. And so, you know, made a lot of guitars at that time in Rough Cut. And then over the years kind of continued doing stuff. And I guess it wasn't really until the Orgy thing where I started to really branch out and really kind of make some crazy shit, basically. Jackson came back to me and said, you know, we'd love to have you back with us, basically. And I said, all right, well, I want to make some really different guitars. And so that's when we made the Roswell Star, which was kind of this crazy interpretation of their Roswell guitar, but it was a star body. And I kind of went full circle back to that very first star body that I had, but a new version of it. And
what year is this?
I guess it must have been about 97.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it was 97. Grover wasn't there anymore, but a lot of the people, the older, you know, crew was still there. Mm-hmm. And so they just approached me and said, hey, why don't you come back? And let's, you know, your band is very futuristic. Let's, you know, we have this crazy guitar already. Let's do some more. Mm-hmm. And I said, all right. So I started drawing things, and I created this guitar called a Disruptor, which is a super weird guitar. It kind of looks like a Space Beetle, or like remember those old Vox Phantom guitars?
Yeah.
It sort of started with that, and then I kind of added some things to it. But anyway, so we ended up making these crazy guitars, and they're super collectible now because there's not very many of them. And then it just didn't really pan out there. You know, we were supposed to do like a signature model and actually create them, and they made all the prototypes, but then the whole thing fell apart and everything got kind of weird. So I ended up moving on to Yamaha, who at your shop, Dave, Eric.
Right.
He was there when I was there at your shop, and Eric said, why don't you come over and look at the stuff that we're doing? and then eventually I created that, which is my Yamaha signature.
Which we can't see.
I'll bring it closer. I don't have the other guitars here. I probably should have. But
that's nice.
You know, it was based off of something that they needed to work off of something a little more standard. So it was really just me kind of tweaking something to make it a little more me. Custom pickup and all the facets and the inlays like barcodes, and I still, we still use these. I made one for Ryan too. We have a 7-string version. These are extremely rare, but they were production models. This is pretty beat up, but this is the 7-string version.
Mm-hmm.
So we still use these because they're baritones.
Super cool.
Big into baritones. I haven't been able to talk Dave into making a baritone yet.
Not yet.
Yeah, I love baritones just because I feel like it's like anything you do on it, it just sounds different. Even when you play the same chords, the same thing, it just to me, it just sounds cooler and makes it, again, unique, which is, one of the things that I've always liked to do is have guitars that, make people look and go, whoa, what is that? And yeah, so playing a baritone too, it's, it's got a heavy sound, but it also, even when you're playing more conventionally, it just sounds different, sounds fuller than just a regular guitar. So even in Julien-K, we still use baritones, but we tune to B because some guitars are tuned standard and then some are B. That way we can interchange, it's like Ryan can play a standard guitar and I can play the baritone, which is a lot of times how it goes, but it depends. A lot of the newer stuff, we're using all the baritones again for everything. The whole new album is all the baritones.
It's going to sound heavy.
Edgier.
Yeah.
Your Julien-K homage to Orgy, kind of.
Yeah, exactly.
So to speak.
Mm-hmm.
So what's your, on the BE 100, like what's your favorite setting, tone on there?
That's a good question because I know there are some settings. I have pictures of my settings that I keep in my phone, but I don't want to go looking through that right now.
No, that's cool. I was just curious. Like, do you have it on high gain or are you like a lower gain guy? I'm just curious what your like optimal tone is if you could describe it.
Well, I definitely like high gain, but I think probably the BE channel just cranked probably is more. I don't know if it's the HBE channel that I was using. I think it's probably the BE channel.
I think you're using the BE, yeah.
Yeah. And then I think one of the switches in the back is up, maybe the middle one, I think, or down. I can't remember. But yeah, I mean, you can get a lot of different sounds out of those things. I definitely like a heavier tone. I think, using a baritone has a lot more low end. So I did have to sort of adjust some things. I know I talked to Dave about this too, because those amps have a lot of low end, which sounds good on a standard tuned guitar, but when I used it with the baritone, it was too much.
Yeah.
And I ended up going back the next day and kind of retweaking everything. And then I was able to, I got it where I needed it to go for the baritone too. But the first day I brought it home and I'm like, oh, this is too thick. And I loved it in rough cut because although we tune a half step down, the bottom end was awesome. I like a lot of low end in guitar. I always have. I'm not one of those like super like screechy, bright kind of sounding guitar guys. I never have been. I've always kind of liked a little bit of a duller sound overall.
Meatier and duller.
Yeah. I like low end in guitar, like real thick low end. Even in Orgy, obviously, with the baritones dropped to B flat and the synth and all that other stuff.
That had a little bit of low end.
Yeah, it was huge.
Just a tiny bit, just a little tiny scotch.
Yeah. But it was good because, like what Ryan did in Orgy and even still what Ryan does now is like he tends to play a lot of the higher parts. So you have this like nice spectrum, where he would kind of cover the sparkle and then I'm carrying the bottom, So it works really well together.
That's cool. Hey, we had a question from Timothy Pierce.
Okay.
He said, "What led to your warplane style guitars?"
Yeah, that was the dad that I grew up with, not my biological father, but my dad that adopted me. He was a pilot.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yep, he was a pilot for American for like 40 years. But before that, he was in World War II and he flew B-17s.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so I had a fascination with that from a very young age. I used to build model airplanes, and when I was, probably 8 or 9 years old, I had them all hanging,
That's
Yeah.
awesome. Yeah.
in my bedroom. But so that fascination there and all the World War II stuff, Army, camouflage, everything was there from a very young age. And at the time when I was doing the stuff with Charvel, no one had ever really done anything like that. There might have been some camo guitars. Like I think George Lynch had like a camo guitar. Maybe someone else had something with some camouflage. But I immediately just thought, what if I just started doing all this, these like nose art, warplane graphics and different things. So I just kind of ran with it. And, each guitar had a theme.
Yeah.
It was a different country basically. I had
Do you have those guitars still?
I don't know. I actually, a private collector has those.
Oh.
Yeah, they were just sitting in storage for so long that I don't know. At a certain point, I have so much gear. I kind of moved on from that phase of my life, not ever thinking that Rough Cutt would ever get back together, which we did a couple years ago and play some shows. I was just like, yeah, I'm probably never going back to that whole era. And
Yeah.
kind of got an offer that I couldn't refuse kind of deal. And I was like, okay, that's that. I gave one to my son. Yeah, and that was that.
That's cool. We got a super chat from Micon Tavares. He says, "My favorite gear talk." Well, thanks, Micon. I'm not sure if I'm saying your name right, but I hope so. Thanks a lot. We appreciate it. We also got another question from Cecil Music, who says, "What's your memories of recording Rough Cutt Wants You? It's such a great record."
That was Jack Douglas and Jay Messina. They had literally just gotten back together to do our record. They hadn't worked together in years. They did all the Aerosmith records, John Lennon, like all this amazing stuff. I think Jack was probably going through a phase of trying to get his life back together at the time, because it was kind of crazy, actually. He was like sleeping in the studio and stuff when we were working, but it was such an amazing experience. He's such an amazing producer, and he's very talented player as well. He plays multiple, as most producers usually do, well now, but back then, a lot of the producers, they all played instruments, drums. He did a bunch of percussion on our record, but it was kind of, we were kind of not in the greatest place. Our label, we did our first record, and it's the old shitty story of our A&R guy left us, like right when our record came out. So we were kind of doomed from the very beginning, really, because we were just kind of a little fish in a big sea at Warner Brothers. And it was a shame because, we had Dio behind us, Wendy and Ronnie took us on
that.
Yeah, Wendy and Ronnie, they were great to us back then. Ronnie took us on tour. We were direct support, no other band, to Dio, playing every stadium in the United States. Not stadium, every arena.
That's amazing.
Some stadium. And we did it multiple times. And the label didn't even bother to put any records in the stores. We would have just sold records just off of, even if 10% of the people thought we were cool, we would have sold records, but they couldn't be bothered to do anything like that. So by the second record, it was kind of like, all right, well, we're going to give you another chance, but you know. So, you know, I don't know. We got really lucky getting Jack and Jay to do it, but you know, they came in and they were just very musical guys. Like I just remember learning so much from them. Just like the guys on our first record. I mean, not just technically, but just musically, and learning, of course, hearing lots of stories about Aerosmith, and you know, getting to hear all the crazy stuff that they used.
The dirt.
Yeah, but it was a different record. I think we really should have stuck more to what we were doing on the first record, the darker kind of heavier sound. It got a bit light and poppier on the second record, and even the look and everything. We had really kind of lost our way. I mean, there's still some good songs on it. I'm not slagging it, but I just kind of feel like what we did with the first record really kind of was more the definitive sound, and I wish we would have kind of stuck with that. And the second record didn't do as well as the first, which, you know, and we were done.
How'd you hook up with the Dios?
There was already a connection there before I was in the band. Ronnie had taken the band under his wing and was producing a lot of the early demos with Jake and with Craig Goldie and all of them. So they were already involved when I got in the band, but the band didn't get signed until I got in the band. We were signed relatively quickly after I got in the band.
That must have been exciting for you.
It was amazing. I mean, I was 20 years old, you know, and it was like, I literally, just like I said, they came to my house, I auditioned, then I went up the next day and auditioned, got the gig, and next thing you know, I'm in LA playing in a band that's popular, and you know, I think it was probably 6 months later we got a record deal.
Killer.
But it all came crashing down relatively quickly. You know, I learned a lot of hard lessons from that. But it was all good stuff. I'm really grateful for those times and the experiences that I had and the band, because all of them made me a lot better player. Because, I mean, I was, you know, 21 years old. I'd only been playing a few years. And my focus at the time when I was really learning was to play lead, because I just thought that was cool, you know. And I listened to like Michael Schenker, Jeff Beck, Uli John Roth, Alan Holdsworth. It's kind of a weird combo of people, but those were like my early guitar influences. And I really learned how to like do rhythm making the records and being in that band, because they were all so seasoned and such great players, all of them, that I had to kind of rise to the occasion as far as rhythmically, you know, because I'd been so focused on playing leads. You know, I could play rhythm, but not like that, not like at the level that those guys, how tight everyone was. That's where I really learned. I learned really quickly. Plus, again, great producers on those records. You know, these are guys that worked with, you know, huge bands.
Yeah.
He rose to the challenge. That's awesome.
To get the knowledge, you know, to be able to pick their brains, and they were so awesome. I think they actually liked that I was interested in the recording part of it. It wasn't just like, big party, let me do my part and get the hell out of here kind of thing. It was like, what does that do? How do you do that? And what's that? You know, like everything. I wanted to learn all of it. So that was amazing for me, and I'm super grateful and happy that I got to do all of those, you know, experiences, plus all the touring that we did. I mean, Ronnie was really good to us.
Yeah.
Right? That was a once in a lifetime experience for sure. And to be friends with a lot of those people from that era and be, you know, around. And I guess I can circle into that Jake story, but basically what happened, Rough Cutt kind of was sort of over because Paul left, our singer left to be in Quiet Riot. Around that time, Jake left Ozzy. I guess, to do Badlands or whatever. But, you know, I mean,
No, he got fired.
Oh, he got fired?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I don't know. I never really got into the dirt of it all, but around that time, since I was out of Rough Cut and everything, the guys in the band was Randy Castillo and Phil Susan, and Jake actually suggested that they get me. And this is when that huge cattle call thing was going on, right? So I went in there, basically got like a, you know, shortcut right in to start playing with them. And at the time, really the only other person they were really considering was Zach. Of course, got the gig, rightfully so. I felt a little out of place, honestly. It was a strange feeling. I loved Randy Rhoads when I was growing up. I loved those first two Ozzy records. They're amazing. And here I am in that spot now. Like, I have this opportunity, right? And it was like really strange. Like I felt really like it wasn't for me.
Was it learning that material and playing that material that wasn't for you, or what was it?
No, I had all that part of it. I mean, I grew up listening to that music, so, you know, playing Crazy Train and all this stuff, and of course I had to play like Bark at the Moon, some of Jake's stuff. And it was just surreal to be in the room with Ozzy, and here I am, like, you know, it wasn't that much amount of time from when I was like idolizing Randy Rhoads and seeing this whole thing happen to me being in Rough Cut, to me being here I am with Ozzy. Wait a minute, I'm playing with Ozzy right now? So, like, eating Indian food, and it's like running down his face as he's there, you know, he's up there singing, right? And I'm just like looking at this, and I'm just like, wow, it's like an out of body experience right now that this is all like happening. And then he would come over to me, and, you know, I'm playing the solos my way. I've never finger tapped. I just, it's not my thing. So I have really long fingers, so I would do it like one hand, all those little parts, and Ozzy was like right there. When I was doing, like, he would literally be like on his knees, like looking right at me as I was playing. You know how he does all those crazy things that he does, right?
Right.
Like sitting here trying to play, and I'm like, don't think you're gonna try and pick me up or anything, because I'm not Randy Rhoads. And I'm like, you know, I've got my foot out, like, stay over there.
Or don't pull my hair.
No, it was really amazing, but, you know, it really wasn't for me. Like, I could kind of tell, and Zach was really nice and really sweet, and we would always kind of run into each other going in and out of the studio, and I'd see him at the Rainbow, and he's like, hey man, I think, you know, I really think you're going to get the gig. And I was just like, no, you're going to get the gig. I promise you're going to get the gig, not me. And, you know, for one thing, they definitely did not want to go through what they went through with Jake, because Jake was also in Rough Cut and managed by Wendy Dio. And I just, you know, aside from whatever playing things, I don't think they wanted to go through all that again, dealing with getting another guy from Rough Cut and dealing with all of that. You know, it was like, they like to always have some new undiscovered person and all that. And that was certainly not me. And honestly, it just really wasn't me at that time anymore. Like, it just didn't really click for me. I didn't know, but I feel like I knew that I was going somewhere else, which eventually became Orgy and doing all this other stuff on my own and creating my own thing, you know?
Were there other guitar players at the time also trying out, or was it just between you and Zach at the time?
Oh, I know they had a lot of guitar players, and there were some that, you know, played with Ozzy for a little bit too, and still did, like Joe Holmes, who is also a friend of mine. And some other people, you know, but at that point, I'm pretty sure it was kind of narrowed down to really like Zach or me. Pretty sure at that point.
And then Joe got it later.
Yeah.
Yeah. Zach,
And And I believe they recorded it. So there's probably some recordings of me playing with Ozzy, which is crazy.
Wouldn't that be awesome to have? Wouldn't you love
Only
that?
to surface later.
Yeah. I think it was recorded on one of those Akai remember those Akai things with the cassette tapes? They were horrible though.
The video cassette tapes?
Yeah, remember those things?
Yeah, I remember those.
It was like a 16 track, I think, right?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, those things horrible though. They dropouts, and like those tapes are probably
Right. Well, they're probably
it's probably all gone.
That's
But
funny.
a fun story, and actually Jake, from what I understand, actually told him, like put in a good word for me basically. Besides Phil and Randy, who I always got along with really well, they definitely pushed for me to come in and all that. So that it was very flattering, and I'm to this day very flattered that I got that opportunity, even just to do that, to be able to tell this story, it's pretty fun.
That's awesome. That's very cool. Keith Watson actually has, he says, talk about Dead by Sunrise.
Yeah, that's another big project. It's a little bit of a sore subject for us because of what happened with Chester. It's tough. It's been tough since he's been gone to talk about that or play any of that or do any of it. But that was it was an amazing project that we did together. Chester, when we were in Orgy, we met the Linkin Park guys. I think we were doing our second record, and Linkin Park was in the other studio. We were at NRG Studios. They were in A and we were in C, or B. Sorry, B. And Ryan actually heard this guy like warming up in the hallway. It was Chester, and Ryan's always the guy that makes friends with everybody. It's just his personality. So he like went over there and just became best friends with him instantly. And then we all started commingling and hanging out and realized, oh, they're on the same label as us. And wow, this guy is a really good singer and all this stuff. And we ended up taking them on tour. Linkin Park and Disturbed opened for Orgy on a tour, which is crazy because they completely blew us out of the water, both bands. But we started having this relationship with Chester over the years, and Ryan and I became really good friends with him and his family. And when we started Julien-K, he actually wanted to be the singer of Julien-K.
Wow.
But the music we were doing, especially in the beginning of Julien-K, was very electro. It was like so opposite and not really like his thing, And it was, of course, very cute and very flattering that he really wanted to be a part of it. And he did end up helping us, and he did end up doing stuff with us with the band. But what ended up happening was we started realizing that Chester had all these songs that he was writing that he kind of really hadn't nowhere to go with them. And so when we started hearing these songs, we were like, wow, these are some amazing stuff here. And so we started to formulate this idea of, Julien-K being more of this production team or, project. And it wasn't really just about that band, that we could also be Dead by Sunrise, basically. But that Dead by Sunrise would be the place where Chester could nurture his ideas. All the song ideas would start with him, but we would build them together as producers and as a band and as writers. We would finish them together, but all the initial ideas would come from him. So he had a place, like an outlet for all of his ideas, which, if you listen to the record and you listen to lyric, it's very dark. The whole album is very dark, and it really kind of shows really more of his psyche than probably most people knew until, of course, what happened. It's kind of all laid out there on the record, and for us, of course, you know, we're the goth guys. You know, all our stuff is very dark too. So it was like, for us, we loved it because it was like, you know, the dark Chester. You know, we never really realized how dark it could get, unfortunately. Right. We learned a lot of that when we were touring together. You know, we definitely got to see some things that we were kind of like, huh. Maybe, you know, some subtle signs of what was to come, but none of us expected what happened, of course. But, you know, doing that project with him and making that record was really amazing. I mean, we did it in this room right here. I mean, this is where the bulk of that was created and recorded and written. And we, you know, I wish we could have done more. You know, I really wish that we could have had more time with him, you know, because he was a very special and extremely talented guy. You know, there's a lot there. And I mean, we used to call him Golden Throat because, I mean, the guy, his voice is just, he had a thing, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Is there any unreleased stuff that you have, or?
You know, I think there is a couple of songs, but you know, we've never, even in Julien-K or Orgy or any of these bands, most of the stuff that we do ends up being kind of what the album is. There usually isn't a lot of cast-off stuff, although I can contradict myself now because Julien-K created a 64-track release called the Time Capsule that we put out a couple years ago that had an entire album of stuff that, you know, didn't make any of the other records. Oh, but yeah, I mean, most of the time, no, there wasn't a lot of extra stuff. But I'm sure there is some stuff. I think there is a couple of songs. You know, we just honestly, it's been kind of a, you know, delicate thing, especially for Ryan and myself. It's I
can imagine.
It's just it's just sad, you know.
Yeah. Very sad.
And but you know, I'm very proud of the record. I'm really happy that we were able to do that and spend, you know, the time that we did with Chester. And you know, we traveled all over the world, and Linkin Park was actually really great to us too. I mean, they let us close their shows while they were on a world tour. We would come out, instead of them doing an encore, we did it.
Wow.
We would play a couple songs and then they would come out and do their encore. I mean, that was like pretty damn cool.
That's very cool, especially when they were the headliner, right? I mean,
yeah. So it was always kind of a surprise every night. You never knew what was going to happen, you know, because we would come out there and people would be like, what the heck is going on? You know, but I think it was fun. You know, it was something different.
Right. So how did Julien-K start? Like, so you may have mentioned that, but
not. I mean, I didn't really go into any detail, but I mean, Orgy basically disintegrated after. I mean, it was already disintegrating by the second record, but by the third record, it was like we were in really bad shape. And Ryan and I were writing a lot together, and we couldn't get the band to do anything. Like, it just became so dysfunctional.
Was it the band or your singer?
Well, I think we all know that.
Yeah.
But, you know, I mean, the band was not working anymore. Just wasn't working. So, you know, Ryan and I had been prolific and we were writing a lot of stuff. And we just started messing around, not really even thinking to do anything else. And it just kind of became this side project that we didn't expect. And then when Orgy we couldn't do anything anymore. I mean, literally, it was just dead in the water. We just started doing Julien-K because We had a lot of stuff we were doing. People were interested in it. We were getting offers, record deals. You know, Chester loved what we were doing and said, look, you know, when you guys get this together, we'll take you out on tour. And he totally did that. We got to tour with Linkin Park on their first Project Revolution tour. We had a great spot on that as well. So, you know, it just sort of happened out of the dysfunction of Orgy, and it became our main focus.
And that's your main focus now, for the most part?
Yeah, yep. Yeah, we've been doing this for quite some time. We're on our like 6th album now. And so basically, like, it's, you know, that's my labor of love, is creating the music that we love and connecting with our fans and being able to produce and mix other bands. I work, you know, in between the two. That's really what I do now. Is I've been doing that for many years. I started engineering, producing, and mixing professionally around the mid '90s. Had some early success with the first Eels record, and then a bunch of heavy bands: Coal Chamber, Spineshank, Danzig, and then of course Orgy, doing well. So I was doing a lot of work back then, and then, you know, mostly was focusing on just doing Julien-K for a while, but now I'm kind of back producing and mixing a lot of bands now again, as well as doing the Julien-K stuff.
Right.
Diversify.
Yeah, I mean, you know.
Well, you have to these days, right?
In this day and age, yes.
Yeah.
Well, the music industry is a fickle bitch, so you have to, you know, ride those waves when you can, and then when that wave is over, you got to figure out how to get on the next one.
Yeah.
So, and that's pretty much what I've done since I was 20 years old, you know. But I always try to be involved in music, whatever it is. It's got to be music. I mean, I've had to run an electronic music label that Fu, the other guy that I work with in Julien-K, is another producer engineer. He's a member of Julien-K as well. We did a thing called Circuit Freak, which was strictly like techno, electro, club music, way before the whole EDM thing broke. We did it all incognito and had some pretty good success, not only with that, but with our label. And that was really interesting and fun to do something completely electronic, you know, club music basically, and no one knew who we were doing this. And then to have success with that was really fun and awesome. And I still take from a lot of that experience, the style and things, and the electronics and the programming and all of that, of course, is applied to all the stuff that we do in Julien-K. I've actually been a DJ on and off since probably, I guess, the late 80s. So that's always something I kind of dabble in here and there. And I guess, you know, it's just all music stuff. You know, anything I can really do and be creative and be involved in music and make a living is obviously where I want to be.
Right. And your music. Sorry, Dave. What were you gonna say?
No, I just said yeah.
Oh yeah. Okay. Some of your music's also been used in like other mediums, right? Like movies and stuff like that.
Yep, we've actually scored some indie films. We've had some of our Julien-K music placed in some blockbuster films like Transformers and Underworld. TV shows like True Blood, So You Think You Can Dance.
Wow.
And then we've done a lot of video game music. We scored the Transformers video game for Activision. We've done a lot of Sega music, created a lot of the Sonic the Hedgehog themes back in the day, which are still like super popular. It's really funny.
That's funny. That's cool.
So it kind of plays into the, the diversity. We've done a lot of really cool remixes. We've remixed The Cure, Avenged Sevenfold, The Dirty Heads, Mindless Self-Indulgence. I'm trying to remember all the. Yeah.
Wow.
Been pretty.
That's cool. That's cool.
Yeah. So, thing that we can kind of, doesn't mean that it's going to be the main thing, but we definitely test the waters and kind of see, like what works. And but any kind of music stuff, anything creative. And I mean, Ryan and I own some restaurants too. I mean, it's kind of funny because all that's kind of creative and risky too.
Yeah, well, that's got to be tough work too. Running a restaurant is not easy.
Yeah, well, luckily I don't do that.
Well, that's good.
Yeah, we've had some pretty good luck with some of our places. Been trying to get Dave to come down to one of them, but
I had the pizza from one of them. Rob came down to one.
Yeah, yep.
Yeah, it was great.
Where's it located?
Well, Lola Gaspar is in Santa Ana. I don't remember the exact address, but that's one of the places. It's kind of a Spanish tapas, American kind of fusion thing. It's been open over 10 years. Food and the drinks there are amazing. It's great. Very proud of it.
That's cool.
And we have a new place called 2145, which is a Japanese-style Napolese pizza, which sounds strange, but trust me when you taste it, the Japanese make some of the best pizza in the world.
Wow.
It's true. It's a thing.
That's shocking.
It's true. It's a thing.
Really?
It is.
You're talking to a New York guy, so like when I hear that, I'm like, really? That's okay.
I know it seems crazy, but it's a really good pizza.
That's awesome.
It's not like other pizzas. I mean, it's a good wood fired oven, brick oven kind of thing, and it's cooked 90 seconds, but they're so good. It's just ridiculous. It's so good.
Love to check it out. That's cool. So
then some other things. And Ryan also has a couple other restaurants on his own. And we do a lot of co-mingling of our businesses. Like he's actually singing now with Edema. He's also working with them as the singer. So I'll be working with them, producing their music, but I'm also doing their merch. I've got a merch company. So I'm, in the process of doing all of our stuff ourselves, like for Julien-K, doing the crowdfunding, creating, of course we create the music and all of that, but yeah, there's got to be a merch element to it all, as well as touring element to it all. And luckily my girlfriend, her family used to do import-export stuff, and so she kind of helped me learn some of that business to be able to make merch for us. And now I'm experimenting with doing it for other people as well. So I'm doing all the merch for Edema for this tour that they're going to be doing next month.
That's cool.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where you mentioned you were heading out on the road.
Yeah.
So how long are you going to be gone?
Like a month. And then Julien-K already has a tour for next year. I can't announce who it's with yet, but we have a tour starting in March of next year.
Excellent.
So we're kind of pointing all of our guns, getting the record done, and Julien-K's record will coincide with that tour. And then there's other things we're working on as well, as far as the release, because for the most part it's already kind of done, but we're kind of seeing, we wanted some other stuff to happen around it. We didn't want to just put the record out and be like, all right, well, here's the record. So we have a tour now, and we're working on some other stuff as well to kind of give it a good shot.
Well, That's a smart move. So we have a question from a guy I think you know, Keith from the Guitar Guru Network.
Oh yeah.
He said he'd love to hear more stories about hanging out at the Rainbow. Any good stories?
Oh boy. Yeah. Not sure most of those are ready for prime time, but
Oh,
honestly,
this isn't prime issue.
yeah, no, I know. I mean, honestly, my early days of hanging out in the Rainbow.
You did watch the Jake show, right? So you know this is.
Yeah.
It can get crazy.
Yeah, it was different than it is now. I mean, it was just nonstop. You could, go anywhere, hang out with whoever you wanted, and everybody was there. It was very fun. It was just, I don't know. I'm trying to think of any particular stories off the top of my head. I can't think of any at the moment, but.
Well, Lemmy comes to mind. Anything with Lemmy, or because he was always there.
It's kind of a big blur, that whole era. I mean, it's like Matt, the bass player from Rough Cutt, who's still one of my best friends. We used to go there, and the big deal was, you could get a Long Island iced tea and pretty much be drunk from one because they were so strong, and we didn't have money or anything, back then. It was like you kind of, you went there to have a good time, and, you didn't really need to have a lot of money to go do things or get a drink or whatever. And of course there were lots of girls who would facilitate all kinds of things if you wanted it. And,
The 80s.
Yeah, it was the 80s. And I was 20 years old.
Yeah. Perfect time.
Which I wasn't supposed to be drinking in there when I was 20, but somehow that happened. Guess that's not that difficult.
No, everybody was doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, how many other people were under fucking 21 in there at that time?
Yeah. A lot. I say off the top of my head, I really can't think of any crazy. I mean, there's so many things that went on there too. It's like, yeah, a lot of it I can't really talk about. We'll get too many people in trouble probably.
No worries. That's all good. We got a question from Keith Watson. It's actually perfect timing here. He says, ask Amir what his rig will be when he's touring on the upcoming Julien-K album.
Well, it's going to be my Friedman BE50. And I'm actually using, Dave already knows this, I'm using the Line 6, hell is that thing called? The HX Effects. Yeah, HX Effects.
I thought, yeah.
The Stomp.
And this kind of goes in line with all of my typical contradictions in that, yes, I'm using a totally rad analog amp and a great guitar and a cable, but I'm using fake effects.
That's okay.
But see, yeah, but for me, I'm not a purist in that sense, because actually a lot of the weird pedals I use and all of that are modeled very well in that device, and it does a lot. I mean, I can do channel switching. Actually, I'd programmed it last year to do only 2 channel switching, not realizing that I was going to end up with the ability to do 3. And so Dave was helping me figure that shenanigans out. But
yeah, that's ultra special how they made that for you.
Yeah.
Line 6. Thank you.
Yeah. So I ended up reprogramming the whole thing so that I can utilize all 3 channels of my BE50. But it's really great because, I mean, I have all these vintage pedals, which, in the studio, I'll use the real pedals. But for live, you really can't beat it. I mean, it has everything in it now. That thing is amazing. And they sound really, really close. I've always liked the Line 6 effect pedal emulations and stuff. I feel like they're the closest in my opinion.
Yeah, that's good.
Cool. And that's running in the loop? That's how you have it?
No, actually, and this was another thing that Dave and I talked about. In front. I'm an in front guy. I've never liked it.
I shudder. I
never liked. Yeah, I kind of prefer to sort of slam the front end with a bunch of crazy pedals. Wow. And my thing is dinging like crazy right now. I like to slam the front end of the amp with all the weird pedals. I don't really like effects loops. It just sounds too hi-fi to me, which I know, again, it's a contradiction, but it's kind of my thing. I like to not totally make sense and just use kind of the best of both worlds. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't really go this way or that. It's got to be all analog, or it's got to be all this or whatever. I like both.
You know, you got to remember that all your favorite guitar players didn't have effects loops.
No.
True.
I mean, I think for like reverbs and delays and stuff, it obviously sounds good through an effects loop. There's no denying that. But for me, it's like, I honestly don't want it to sound that good. I kind of want it to be in that little squishy place that happens when you put it in the front. That's just me, though.
Gotcha. So I'm curious, what's some of your favorite gear you've recently got, or anything new that's like exciting you?
Well, funny enough that I was quite skeptical about that plasma pedal until I got it, because I tried it on guitar and I'm like, okay, it's cool, it's crackly, it's sputtery, whatever. It's, you know, it's got a thing. But I ended up using it on other things, and that's where I really ended up liking it. Like on bass, it sounds crazy, and on vocals, it sounds amazing.
Wow, vocals.
Yeah. Yeah, it's got some featuring on the new album for sure. I mean, the new single, it's all over that, the bass and the vocals. Obviously, I've been using Dave's rig now, that's amazing. It's so nice to have something so good to be able to tour with that is reliable, and I can call Dave and something breaks.
You gonna fly me out?
Hey, just everyone else. I mean, you're amazing with your like customer support. I see you all over the chat rooms, and people are always talking you up. Oh, it was so great, the service that Dave gave and all that. I'm like,
I have no life. Or that is my life.
Yeah. Well.
Yeah.
You're doing a good thing, but yeah, that was something really fun. Of course, I got a new keyboard recently that I'm really loving, which is the Electron Digitone keyboard. That thing is just ridiculous. It's an FM synth, that has nothing to do with guitars, but like I said, I love all of that, synthesizers, and I've got lots of weird vintage stuff, but then I also love a lot of new stuff too. I love to mix and match all of that stuff. Most of my pedals, most of them are vintage. I do like the Death to Analog. Not Death to Analog. That's our record. Sorry. Death by Audio.
Yeah, they're good.
Those are the best.
They make some weird stuff, and I like weird.
I love all their stuff. It's amazing.
It's all really kooky, but it sounds good too. Like they make some crushing, fuzz pedals and stuff that are just awesome. But I mean, most of the stuff I have is old. A lot of the stuff that I'm still using, I have an original Super Fuzz, which is really the Hyper Fuzz before the Hyper. I mean, the Hyper Fuzz is basically a Super Fuzz. I guess is it Univox? I think so. I think the original is a Univox.
Univox Super Fuzz, yeah.
Right?
Right. Yeah, that's it. It's amazing.
Well, the Hyper Fuzz is basically, it's the same thing.
In one mode, maybe, yes.
Well, they both have the same switchable modes. The Hyper Fuzz was basically a clone of the Super Fuzz.
Oh.
They have their own, things, but they're very similar. And then, of course, Behringer came out with one for $20.
Yes, they do. It does sound good, too.
And you know what? It sounds just like it.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably, as far as a pedal clone goes, I think it's probably the closest one I've ever heard. I mean, it sounds the same.
You ever see that video by JHS, Josh Scott, the Behringer video?
I don't think so.
It's maybe a couple months old. He did a video, JHS pedals, about Behringer pedals, and about which of their pedals are the clone pedals, and sound great, and they're $20, So yeah, it's pretty wild.
I do have a story, which one night when I was there, I'm going to go back to that. Somebody reminded me of a story. My girlfriend reminded me of a story. It was actually how I met the Alice in Chains guys. I came out of the Rainbow one night, and there was this crazy guy. He was kind of dressed in like a velvet thing with like a top hat or something. Looked like something out of like Alice in Wonderland, and his name was Mike Starr. And he came up to me, and he came up to me and just started talking to me randomly. He's like, "Hey man, you look really cool, and like, what's your deal?" And he just starts talking to me, and he starts telling me this whole story. Yeah, my band got signed, and I'm like, yeah, I've heard this one before. I didn't. And then he starts telling me this whole story, and then he names his A&R guy, and I'm like, wait a minute, I know this guy, and he's not like a big A&R guy. He's just got his job there, and he's an old friend from San Diego. And so he's like, yeah, why don't you come back to our Oakwood? We're all hanging out here, and we just kind of finished our record and all this stuff. So I went back to the Oakwood, and it was the whole band was there, and that's when I met Jerry and Lane and Sean. And they played me their album, which was on a red cassette tape, like those old promo label tapes, they were what, Epic or Columbia, so it was red, the whole thing. And I loved it, and they ended up giving it to me. And then I ended up listening to it for months after that, after meeting them, and stayed friends with them. And then the album came out, and I couldn't find it anywhere because I wanted to get the CD to get the full fidelity of it. Ended up driving the Moby Disc out in Santa Monica to get that one and only CD that I could find in LA when their album came out. And then I don't know, it's like 6 months or so later they did something, and then they started blowing up, and that's how I met Jerry and all those guys who I just did the rock and roll fantasy camp I've done a couple times with Alice in Chains and Stone Temple Pilots. Those guys were the headliners, so it's always.
I think I'm going to see those guys tomorrow.
Who?
STP's on the bill.
Oh, cool.
Man.
So I'm gonna go say hi.
Yeah, tell Robert and Dean I said hi for sure.
Yeah,
These guys were awesome. I mean, we were really fortunate to tour with them last year. We got to tour with STP, Bush, and the Cult last year, which was
great.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Very cool.
And then we toured with Jonathan Davis and the Birthday Massacre after that, which was really, really cool. Because we obviously, the Orgy Korn connection, I mean, and Ryan being from Bakersfield, there's a whole connection. That's where the Edema thing comes in, and we go way back with all of those guys.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Cool.
So I think let me see. Oh, we had a question, super chat question from Modern
Oh.
Vintage. He says, Dave, any plans to update the Dirty Shirley 40 soon or introduce a flagship version like you did with the BE 100 Deluxe? What would you change? Any new speakers soon?
Dirty Shirley. Maybe. Oh, I had thoughts about doing that down the road, but we'll see. There's no concrete plans at the moment.
Okay. And the speakers, they're still in the works?
Speakers, I'm not doing anything with right now.
They're on hold.
We might revisit that in the near future.
Okay.
I got to the point with the speakers where it was like I got to a point where I liked them, but then were they really better? That was the problem I was having. How do you improve upon like a greenback or a vintage 30 or, it's so hard. I mean, I think. And if it wasn't going to be totally better, why do it?
Right.
Yeah, I actually had this conversation with Dave because when he was telling me he was going to do some speakers, I was asking a lot, like, I want to hear these things, And when I was doing the reamping for our new album, I actually I borrowed one of Dave's cabinets. The cabinet that's on the whole album is Dave's. It has greenbacks and
vintage 30s.
And vintage 30s. That's what I used for the album. And I was just laughing because at the end of the day, I always go back to greenbacks.
Yeah.
I'm like, I've never found a speaker that I've liked, at least for like a, Marshall, Friedman, whatever type of, 4x12 cabinet. I've never found anything that I've ever liked better. There's just, from the first time I heard it, first time I ever had a greenback is when I got in Rough Cut and I re-speakered my Marshall cabinets because I think they probably had whatever stock 65 watt speakers or whatever was in there. And I changed them all out to greenbacks and blackbacks, and I still actually have those cabinets as well, but they're just buried in my locker, and I have to dig it out, I think. But it has blackbacks and greenbacks in it, and it's like when I went in to do the reamping for the new album, I tried the vintage 30s, and I ended up, as soon as I put it on the greenbacks, I was just like, oh, there it is.
Yeah.
It's like I've never been able to escape that, and it kind of doesn't even matter what microphone I use or whatever. And honestly, for guitar, there's very few microphones to me that make any difference for the tone.
Right.
You're never going to go wrong with a 57, but usually a 57 is never enough. You got to add something to it. And back in the day, it was always a 421. Now I think it's the Royer, the 121. I've been leaning more on that than the 421. And I also really love Sennheiser 409s.
Yeah.
Which you can't get anymore. So you have to buy a vintage one, and none of the new mics sound anything like the 409. Those, I would say, those three, a 67 and a Beyer M160, those are probably like the 5 most favorite guitar mics.
All good choices.
And you can use them in any combination or on their own. I have been using, these mics are really fun. Talk about gear stuff. This is studio stuff, but these Placid audio mics.
Wow.
I don't know if you
those. They look cool.
They're super cool. This guy Mark makes them. And they're like lo-fi mics basically. This one's kind of a brighter, kind of more mid-rangey, really has almost no low end, not a lot of top end. This is called the Copperphone. And this is also great on guitar or bass. You can add this in to any combination and it sounds amazing. This one is a Russian military, the element, the carbon element that's in here, is a Russian military piece that he makes. It requires phantom power. If you shake it, it's like a salt shaker. You can hear the the carbon in there like rolling around. But this one is like super distorted and very thick sounding. I've used this on a lot of different things: drums, percussion, all these on vocals. But this one actually is really cool on bass.
Do you sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, you take an RE20 or something and you just put this with it. It's awesome.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah.
Where'd you get those?
I don't remember where I found out about them originally, but you can just buy them directly from Placid Audio.
Oh wow.
Yeah. They're really fun. They're like my two go-to fun mics.
Have you messed with IRs?
Not too much. Again, I think when it comes to some of that stuff, like especially some of those modeling mics and all that, it's like they sound good on their own, but I'm afraid to risk what happens later on. So I just have like a U47 kind of knockoff mic. Sounds great.
Yeah. Yeah. It use the real.
Yeah.
If you can, I guess it's better than, you might as well.
Yeah, I mean, for me, like I said, it's really, I guess, because I've had the experience, being a mixer or whatever, and it's like, I get a lot of stuff from people that, they use plugins, and I end up having to do a lot to them to make them. Sometimes I have to just totally reamp it, and just redo the sounds altogether, whether it's bass or guitar. Sometimes it doesn't matter. If it's a more electronic band, a lot of times it doesn't matter. It's like, it's fine. Again, it's kind of sitting in the background. It's not a featured instrument per se. So I guess it makes me a little skittish when it comes to anything that involves, microphones or like, recording a singer, because, that's really, probably the most important thing you're going to do on a record is you've got to capture that vocal performance, and the last thing I want is to be fighting with that later on if it's not cutting,
Yeah.
That's not going to be fun. So in that case, and the other thing too for me is just being able to just have a piece of hardware that I can pick up and take. I don't have to have software installed, or I don't have to, in order for something to work. I don't really want that. I'd rather just be able to pick up the microphone and take it with me, and it works,
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And, I guess with some of those amp modelers and stuff, I mean, they all sound decent, but I don't know. I think it kind of depends on the tone too, because all the tones that I typically like to go for are kind of weird. They're not your standard sound, so most of those boxes don't really have that kind of stuff. And I use a lot of just funky amps, and some not so funky, obviously, just good hard rock amps like Dave's. But then, I kind of mix it with other things, so it's kind of just, that stuff just doesn't really work for me personally.
Cool. No, that's awesome.
He likes the real stuff.
He likes the real stuff. Sounds good to me.
Like I always, people ask, well, what mic pre should I buy? Well, there's only two.
Yeah.
There's a Neve or an API.
Well, I actually think
maybe there's another one, but
there's three. And there are the three that I have, which is a Neve type API, and then the Universal Audio 610. I have that. I've been using that since it came out, like, the reissue of it, like, I don't know, 20 years ago. To me, that for like vocals, I think that's what I've been using on everything since that came out, basically.
Yeah.
Those are my three. Those are my three voices for going into the box.
And that's all you need.
Yeah. I mean, you got to create the character, because that's the whole thing with the digital realm. And I've kind of had to relearn working, mixing, especially in the digital realm, because back in the day when we would record on tape and have all this gear and the boards and microphones and all this stuff, there's just character all along the way. Everything is adding, harmonic content and character and EQ and phase stuff. And, you end up with something that already kind of has a sound, where now it's, I try to do that going in, having good mic pre's and whether it be pedals or whatever it is, going in. But once it's in there, it's still relatively sterile.
Yeah.
And you have to go a bit crazy with the plugins and stuff, because even the plugins, you kind of have to pile them on. Typically one compressor isn't, it just doesn't do what that original compressor did as a piece of hardware. You might be able to, back in the day, you'd put one good high-end compressor on a vocal and it's probably done. Now it's like you've got to combine like multiple things. And
same rings true in live. The Tom Abraham, who we had on our show, said the exact same thing. It's like, yeah, in the old days of the box PAs and analog consoles and analog gear, you just pretty much put the faders up and, wow, there you go. It sounds good. He goes, now I have to pile on plugins in order to even remotely approach how good it used to sound.
Yeah.
And it's not quite right still.
Well, and that's what I was saying is I kind of had to relearn everything, because I've been working in the box now. Back in the, 90s when I was mixing, producing, and engineering records, it mostly was on tape. And then it, started to go digital when I was in Orgy. It was kind of a hybrid thing where we were mixing, some stuff was tape, some was digital tape even, like there was, plus, but you were still mixing it in like a real studio with real outboard gear. So, over the years, as I've gotten back into it now, I feel like the software has really gone to another level though. A lot of, especially like the universal audio stuff is really good. But a lot of it, it's just, you do kind of have to pile it on a little bit more to kind of get it to go somewhere. So you have to have a relatively powerful system, but it's definitely been a learning curve. I'm still learning every day how to do it better, But it took me a little while. It took me a few years to kind of get back to a place where I felt like I was, back in the 90s with the gear, And I think that kind of it kind of goes across the board with all the emulating stuff to me. I think it's gotten really good. Some of it's actually really good, but I don't know if it's enough yet, if it's all the way,
Yeah, it's not all the way yet, yeah.
Nah.
And Modern Vintage has another question for you, Dave, with the super chat. Thank you, Modern Vintage, for the super chat. Dave, related, do you hear the same artificial, harsh, grainy top end and mids with a Boss Waza or IRs in the same way you do modelers? How is feel?
No, not necessarily. It's different. How do I answer that? IRs in general, can be pretty much nulled and sound pretty much like the cabinet with the proper load. The only thing that happens with an IR is a static picture of the cabinet at a certain, how do I want to say it? It doesn't take into account how you're driving the cabinet. So the speaker changes how the character of it sells. The speaker changes as the volume goes up or down. So how a greenback sounds with a 100-watt Marshall blazing through it versus a 10-watt amp going through it is very different.
Yeah.
So the one thing the IR doesn't quite capture is that element. Although realistically, I mean, it's good. But you know what? If you got the real cabinet and some mics and some mic preamps, just use the real cabinets. I mean, if you can't, then use the IR.
Right.
Yeah.
If you're not capable or not able to do that, use that. And, not all IRs are created equal either. So there's a lot of really good ones out there. Most of the stuff by Owen Hammer is really good. They're the ones I like the most. He does a really good job, and I know the guy, and he's extremely crazy about it.
I feel
he's
like
really into it.
I feel like some of the guys that do more of the metal stuff can get some really amazing tones out of some of that stuff.
Yeah.
They're really, you know what I'm saying? Like they're really, crazy metal kind of stuff. I've heard some stuff and like, wow, that's, it's just, I guess for me, it's just like, I wouldn't know what to do with that. That's just me though. Cause I like weird stuff, our music, all the bands I've ever been in it's always been kind of weird. But that's just how I am. I like kind of being this way a little bit,
So Joe Hervey 84 said, "I thought a rectifier was used for Orgy. I could be wrong."
No.
Okay.
I will actually divulge to you the supposed secret tone. I think Dave knows already. I think I told you, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. The funny thing is, aside from the pedal and all that, the amp that was used a lot on the first album was my Roland JC 120.
Wow.
Yeah. So that was run into a Marshall cabinet, and I think it was literally just mic'd with the 57. So between the DI and the sound, the JC 120 speakers were disconnected. So basically I was using it as a solid state amp, running that into the cabinet with all those effects and the guitar synthesizer and all that stuff.
Wow.
That kind of was the initial, that's what gave it its sort of really crazy, crackly, kind of fucked up tone. It's actually a really kind of a funny story of guitar stuff, guitar tones. On the first album, we had a friend named Josh Abraham who's since gone on to be a pretty famous producer, but he was kind of in his beginnings there with us in Orgy. We had done all the demos. We had started all the demos in his garage and at Energy Studios. And when we finished the first album, I'm never going to let Gina, his wife, live this one down. When we finished the first album, she literally came over to me while I was at the studio and started yelling at me and was saying what the fuck are you thinking? Like, those guitar sounds are the worst thing I've ever heard in my life. And she was angry. She was actually really angry about it. And Josh was like over in the corner and he was like laughing. He thought it was hilarious, but she was literally ripping my head off about my decision, basically, of what the sound was that we were going for. And I was just like, that's it. You've just validated what I've done. I've polarized you to a point where you think it's the worst thing you've ever heard. And I'm like, I think I've done it.
Perfect.
Just
what I wanted.
Yeah, I told her that. I was just like, that's exactly what I want it to sound like. I want it to sound broken. I want it to sound fucked up. I don't want it to sound like anything that anybody's ever really done before. So, cool. And then she didn't talk to me for like 2 months after that.
That's awesome.
So,
So
Well, that obviously worked out.
yeah.
yes, exactly. Exactly.
Exactly.
So how you doing on time, Amir? You all right?
Yeah, I'm good. We can do. I don't know how long we've been talking. So.
I think we're going about 2 hours now.
Wow. All right.
That's cool.
Well, if anybody has any last questions, maybe we should knock those out. I don't know.
I'm looking to see if we have any other questions that I've missed. Dave, do you see any?
You know what? I've already lost. No, what I've learned is when I do it on the computer screen, no problem. I can keep track of what's going on. But on my phone, it's just like, after a while, I put it down and I'm like, yeah, okay.
Yeah, it gets hard.
It's too bad. Pass me one of those Yinglings, Dave.
I know,
Pass
right?
it through the screen.
There you go. Wait. There we go.
I wish it worked that way. I wish it worked that way.
Yeah, someone actually asked that question. What is Dave drinking tonight? I'm drinking Yingling.
Yeah.
Only available in, I don't know what states, but
Well, actually, more states than it used to be. It used to only be Pennsylvania. That's where it comes from. But now you can actually get it in a lot of places.
I can get it in Florida. I know I can get them.
See?
it's not West Coast at all.
Oh, wow. Yeah, Ying's good beer. Here's a good question for you, Amir. What's your memories of being involved in the Hearin project?
Oh, that was a really fun night. Again, of course, the Dios having us be a part of that was amazing, and Paul got to sing some first lines. I had actually went there with pretty good friends at the time with Carlos Cavazzo from Quiet Riot, and we went there together, and of course it was a pretty big party. The one thing that really stood out to me about that whole session was just how amazing Rob Halford was. we were all in the room, and of course all of us were singing this chorus, right? And feeling kind of silly because the chorus is "We're stars," and it's kind of like, it's not what Ronnie meant, of course. But it felt kind of silly to some of us. But Rob Halford was a few feet in front of me, so the back of his head was facing me. But when we were singing all of that, all you could hear was Rob. He was hitting this note that was like so high, and you can hear it in the recording, but he dominated that whole choir. I mean, I had no idea how amazing. I knew he was an amazing singer, but I didn't know how much power he had behind it too. And it's one thing to hit the notes, but to hit the notes with that kind of volume, it's like kind of unheard of. And of course, Ronnie was like that too. Ronnie, he would walk out on stage because a lot of times we would play together at things or whatever, and he'd come out. As soon as he got on the mic, he could be on the same mic as any other singer. And the other singers are all struggling, blah, 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 can't hear themselves. Ronnie would come out, and you would just hear his voice from everywhere.
Yeah,
like,
amazing.
Yeah. Craziest thing, how that is. But, yeah, that night, it turned into a big party, and I remember Carlos ended up getting so drunk that he gave me the keys to his car, which was, at the time, was a Ferrari. That was kind of fun. So then I drove us to the Rainbow.
There we go. Common theme.
There's a story. Now here we go.
It was kind of cool pulling up to the Rainbow in a Ferrari. Yeah. How you doing? Here's my keys.
That's always nice. That's cool. Here's a cool question from Eric Johnson. How much of an influence was Marilyn Manson?
I would say, I'm sure he's referring to Orgy. Funny enough, I'd say more like musically, I don't think he was that much of an influence on what we were doing. I would say vocally, I'm sure it was somewhat of an influence for Jay. I think musically though, we were kind of really listening to a lot of 80s and 90s industrial. I mean, we used to call it death pop because we got coined that at some point. But I always thought that was a great juxtaposition. You know, the yin and the yang, the black and the white. I always like those types of things where it's just so contradictory. You know, that it's like that sort of defined what we were. You know, we were taking all these sort of 80s, you know, Duran type things and then mixing that with what was more industrial, like Nine Inch Nails and Ministry and of course what Manson was doing. But I don't really think we sounded like that. I feel like we fit in that genre, but I think we were a little more like science fiction or something.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know,
definitely more of the new wave stuff stuck through,
and especially in our image, whereas he was more grotesque, which worked well for him. We went more, you know, it was like what we always used to jokingly say, Duran on crack.
Right.
Here's a good question from Tom Digital. Thanks for your question. Are you going to continue infusing those synth guitar sounds into Julien-K stuff? I've learned so much cool stuff tonight. Thanks for listening.
Yeah, that's awesome. I do actually use some of that stuff, but I think since I've become more proficient on actually keyboards, that for the most part, I kind of do that now more than trying to do. I kind of like to, with every project that I've, you know, really been a founder of or whatever, I like to create a sound for those bands. You know, whether it be Dead by Sunrise, which was a more raw kind of rock and roll kind of vibe, because that's kind of really where his roots were. Orgy, of course, is its own thing. And then Julien-K, we really wanted that to kind of be its own thing, which has a little of all of that in it, but it's also its own kind of beast. And of course, all the bands that I work with, I always try to infuse a sound that becomes their own as well. So probably not so much. I mean, I do it once in a while. We'll do some lines or things with some of the old gear. And I mean, Ryan, especially on the new album, we're doing a lot of the stuff from that era. It's kind of taking that whole thing and moving it a little bit forward. I think he'll probably like that, like our new record.
Cool.
Judging. Yeah.
Cool.
L. Scott Music. Amir, if you like weird, were you a fan of Devo?
Yes, of course. You know, honestly, it's probably where I stole a lot of my robot moves when I was in, because I did a lot of that kind of stuff. I think I probably got a lot of it from Devo unconsciously. But again, it was one of those things where, you know, everybody, especially in different eras, they always kind of have all these kind of moves that like rock bands do or whatever. And there's always kind of like over the years, there's all these different things that sort of catch on. And then a lot of the bands, they kind of all have the same moves. You know what I mean? And I think in that band, and because of the music we were creating was so cold and futuristic and kind of robotic in a lot of ways, I just started moving that way. But I think I got a lot of that probably from like bands like Devo, you know, because they were probably the first band that ever kind of did that kind of stuff, I think.
I think so.
Yeah, I think so too, right?
Yeah, they were so unique and original.
Yeah. No, that's, yeah. I mean, I have obviously tons of influences outside of obviously the metal stuff, all the new wave and goth and industrial stuff, Depeche Mode, of course, Devo, Killing Joke, Nights Are Ebb.
Killing Joke is cool too. I've listened to that stuff.
That stuff, a lot of that stuff, it just holds up, you know. still. You listen to it and it's just like, man, so good.
Yeah, absolutely.
The Cure, of course. The Cure was actually a big influence on Orgy as well.
Yeah.
We loved the layering. Cure always had, obviously great bass lines, besides the amazing songwriting of Robert Smith, but they always did such a great job of layering so many different parts, but yet it all sounded like this big wall of sound, right? That's still to this day is a big influence.
Yeah.
Guitar and I guess keyboard, but a lot of it was guitar layerings that they did.
I've never seen The Cure. I always wanted to.
Yeah. I saw him probably a few times. I saw him at Dodger Stadium. I saw him at a private show. I actually got to meet Robert Smith. That was amazing.
Cool.
That's cool.
He had our album. He had been listening to it and then asked us to tour with him. And I met him. He's like, I've got your CD on my bus right now. I really like it. I'm like, wow.
You're like, what do I say?
What do I say to that? Holy shit.
That's awesome.
Robert fixed my album.
Yeah. I loved seeing him at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. He was, you see his interview?
Yeah. That was great.
Oh, man. I felt bad for that girl.
I have another funny story with Rob Halford that just made me think of that, because one time I was flying to Arizona to see my friends in Coal Chamber, who I had either just finished the record or whatever they were playing. And I was sitting there, this was mid-90s, I was sitting at the airport and Rob Halford sits down across the way from me. And so I'm like, this is weird. So I went over to him and I just said, hey, Rob, I don't know if you remember me, but I was in Rough Cut and we had known each other back then, but I hadn't seen him in years. Totally remembered and was super stoked to see me. And we started talking and he's like, why don't you sit with me on the plane? Let's, hang out, talk and whatever. And I said, okay. So I get on the plane and we're sitting there and I had just finished the Orgy record and we were talking about stuff. And I told him, I said, I have this new band and doing all this stuff with guitar synthesizers. And he got this look on his face and he's like, oh, they got a lot of shit for that. And I said, I know you guys got a lot of shit for doing that Turbo record, but I have to tell you that it was a huge inspiration for me. And I love that record. I know I'm probably, he's like, yeah, well, you're one of very few, although the record was successful, but I know they got a lot of shit for it. So I said, I just finished the record and you wanted to hear it. He's like, oh, I'd love to hear it. And I was like, really? And he's like, yeah, I would love to hear it. So I gave him the thing, he put the headphones on, and he literally listened to the entire record. He didn't talk to me. The entire flight and listened to the whole record from top to bottom. And I was just like, I guess he likes it. Like, I couldn't believe it. He was like, he was like rocking out and he was like listening to the whole thing. And I think at the time he had done that, what was that album? I think it was called like 2 or something.
Yeah, with John.
It was around that time with John 5, right?
Yeah. It was John 5 and 2, I'm pretty sure.
I think so. Which it was kind of like industrial rock kind of thing, I think.
Yeah.
Anyway, he listened to the whole record and he had nothing but great things to say. He was so nice. He was so flattering. This was like a guy, when I was a kid, like when I was talking about my guitar influences, like as far as like, single guitar players, Jeff Beck, Holdsworth, Schenker, Uli Roth. But when it came to like the dual harmony guitar players, it's definitely KK Downing and Glenn Tipton, and then what's his name, Scott Gorham and Brian Robertson from Thin Lizzy.
Yep.
I loved all of that. So, you know, growing up being a huge Judas Priest fan, of course, for him then to tell me all this stuff, just like Robert Smith, I mean, I had like both ends of the spectrum.
Yeah, that's
Like,
awesome.
great. Like, you know, it was so cool. It was
That's
so
cute.
flattering. He was so nice. It was really awesome.
Yeah, he's still got an amazing voice.
Yeah.
I mean, he's still going. I mean, I just saw them on
Oh,
tour.
he's still great. Yeah.
Yeah, just blowing. I mean, I almost felt like you could hear him over the band, even if he didn't have that mic.
No, but that's what I'm saying. Was
Yeah,
like when we did the hearing aid thing, I was just like, I was flabbergasted. I'd never seen anything like that in my life
yeah, he's
or heard.
yeah, he's amazing. Yeah. Eric Johnson says, "Is John Five the greatest industrial guitar player of all time?"
What?
I don't. Yeah, I don't think so.
I don't know.
Yeah, I think John Five plays a lot of styles, man. He's
He's played with Zombie, I think, and he played with Manson, right? So he played with Manson, Zombie.
David Lee Roth.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Wait. Katie Lang.
Yeah, well, yeah, okay. So he's just a good guitar player.
Yeah,
all around.
he's just yeah. I mean, the guy can chicken pick to playing crazy shit. So, Tom Digital, when you guys first started playing Orgy live, most of that stuff was played raw, right? I'm not sure what that
Yes.
means. Okay.
It was a disaster. Yes. We had feed drums mistriggering, and when we went out on that tour with Korn, we basically got our asses handed to us.
Hmm.
Nothing working how it was supposed to. Well, not how it was, but we had been used to rehearsing in controlled environments. So when we got out and basically were thrown on stage with no sound check or anything, it was a fucking disaster every night for the first couple of weeks of that tour. We literally thought we might be going home. Like, it was, I mean, for us it was that bad. I don't know how bad it was, especially with the drums and stuff. Everything was like mistriggering, and it was really difficult to make it work consistently, because that stuff wasn't really made to be put on tour and on the road. It was like for people to play in their bedrooms, you know. And our rigs, although my rig was completely solid, the other guys had problems with their rigs, even though they were way less complex. And I never know why. Never knew why that was. Our bass player had the most problems, and he had like three pedals. Three pedals. And it was like always something going wrong. Ryan mostly was good. There were a couple of bad nights where it was tricky. We had to figure it out, but yeah, it was bad until basically what happened. We were in New York, and we basically kind of had a showcase show for Orgy, because I don't know, maybe the label put it together or something, but we had like a showcase show, and it was the first time we were able to have our own sound man. We had a sound check, and we were able to do everything sort of in our control. And we pretty much decimated that place. And after that show, the guys in Korn went to the production and the tour, because we were on the Family Values tour. That's where we basically started on this huge tour. And they just told everybody, like, you've got to give these guys a sound check. You've got to start helping them. They're not a 3-piece rock band. They're doing something different, and you need to listen to what they're saying and help them. And then everything started going good after that. But in the first couple of weeks, we literally were starting to think like maybe we should just go home. It was that bad. Like, we were like, maybe we're really, really crazy, and this was a really bad idea, and maybe we really suck. It was that bad.
Well, I'm not sure when Tom Digital saw you guys, but he said it sounded great to me.
Good. Well, maybe that was after we had it together. And as we progressed, and especially by the later tours that we did, we really had it together, and it was really sounding like the studio, but live, like it was powerful and articulate. You could hear everything, and there was no mistriggering of the drums, and it was rough.
It was good.
I bet. Yeah, that's cool. So I think we've covered all the questions, and
Okay.
So what are some of the things that are coming up for you, Amir?
Well, I think we kind of touched on it, but I can recap. The new Julien-K record is basically done. Harmonic Disruptor, and the title kind of says it all. It's meant to be a bit of a punch in the face. It's going to be probably the most aggressive record we've done. It is a bit of a throwback to some of our history, but it's also pushing forward, new, all at the same time. We've got a tour coming up in March of next year, so pretty much all of this stuff is going to line up with that when we go out and do that. In the meantime, right now, I've been, like I said, I'm producing this band with Ryan called Slaves to Humanity. Great rock and roll band from the OC, and they're all like 15 years old. It's really stuff.
Babies.
Yeah.
Cool. That's what you like to see.
Yeah, I'm also working and mixing a lot of other projects for a lot of other people. And then we're also doing this Edema run starting in like 2 weeks. And Ryan is singing with them. So we've got our hands in a lot of stuff. Like I said, we're always commingling all of our business, whether it's the restaurants or music or whatever. But we kind of just always help each other. I mean, that's what friends do.
That's awesome. Well, Amir, I want to thank you for coming on. Everybody check out Amir Derakh. Check him out online and his social media stuff. Do you want to give your address for your social media?
I mean, basically, you can just type my name in and you'll find all kinds of stuff, I'm sure. AmirDerakh.
Perfect. And for folks who are interested in what's coming up on the show, we have Rick Beato on October 11th, which will be a cool show. Then October 25th, we've got Santiago Alvarez. And Santiago worked for Marshall for a really long time. He actually lives in China, Dave. So we're going to do it on...
What time are we going to be doing this?
We're actually doing it a regular time, but it'll be Saturday morning for him.
Okay.
So, and then Mike
What date
Saldana, that's October 25th.
Okay.
And then we've got November 8th, if that works for you, Dave, for Mike Soldano, Part 2.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, that'll be awesome. So, yeah, and also everybody check out Sweetwater. They still have some sales going on. So got to give the Sweetwater plug.
This is our plug.
This is our plug. There you go.
Nice.
Check out Sweetwater 48-month interest-free financing.
Go buy my amps.
There you go. Go buy some Friedman amps,
Yeah.
Friedman guitars, Friedman pedals.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you guys have a great weekend. Amir, hang on while we hang up. And
let me just say thanks to not only both of you guys, but for everybody tuning in. And thank you so much. Thanks, Dave. Always fun.
Of course.
To geek out together, and really nice to meet you, Mark.
Same here, Amir. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thanks, guys. You have a great weekend, and we will talk to you on the next show.
Cool.